People don't like the Rings of Power. What should we do? Hey, people like that Breaking Bad. Maybe we should just compare it to that. Brilliant. Hello, I'm Marvin, and I'm the Movie Monster. Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite properties of all time, and the bastardization of Tolkien's great work by hacktivists at Amazon was the final straw that actually led to the creation of this channel. The world is about to get another flare-up of the disease that is the Rings of Power as it returns for Season 2. Never mind the fact that the show's first season lost an astounding percentage of its initial audience with a shameful 37% completion rate. But Amazon paid a lot of money for this property, and the first season cost a literal $1 billion to make, so there was no way they were going to abandon the project. Now, in a desperation move to get people to watch the second season of this dreck, Amazon is invoking the name of great shows written by talented people and characters played by great actors to generate any interest in this mindless garbage. The Rings of Power. This is, without a doubt, one of the most insulting, horrible things ever created by humankind. Taking something that is one of the greatest accomplishments ever put down to paper by a writer in the English language, that being The Lord of Rings and J.R.R. Tolkien, and taking it and perverting it into some modern day garbage meant to ruin identity politics and nothing else. The Rings of Power was somebody sat down and was like, what if we made a Lord of the Rings that had black people and women as main characters? And somebody was like, okay, cool. What's the story? And they were like, no story. Just, that's as far as we got. Just, minorities, women, that's it. Because there was no thought put into anything. The lore is just utterly destroyed the more this show goes on. And now we're starting to see it, as season 2 shows up. Now, nobody wants this second season. Nobody wanted the first season. I won't say nobody wanted the first season. I think a lot of people were curious as to what it was going to be. But then, the more we saw as the season got closer, everybody was all okay with the idea of a Lord of the Rings television show. But then as it got closer and we saw what it was and what people they were doing with it, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. So meet the Rings of Power's new hill troll, inspired by Breaking Bad's Mike Ehrmantraut. If there's two things I never thought I'd hear in the same sentence, it's Breaking Bad and Lord of the Rings. They are two things that mean nothing together. I mean, look at this troll. Look at him. That's what they're saying. Looks like it's supposed to be Mike from. Kind of almost got like Walter. Walter, are you starting a drug ring of power? So Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Rings, they had a cave troll. In the opening episode of the Lord of the Rings of Power, Galadriel battled the snow troll, making short work of a chilly foe. Short work is a understatement. Galadriel had absolutely no issue defeating that troll. It was one of the first things that people remember from that show, and it was one of the first things that turned people off of that show. In season 2, a fresh brute will be making its entrance into Middle Earth, ready to deal out serious damage with significant stature and grouchy demeanor. Get ready for Damrod, the hill troll, stomping his way into J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay's epic fantasy saga. By the way, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay are hacks. Just so you guys know, they are responsible for that first season. They are terrible. They have no idea what they're doing. They're grossly unqualified to do any of this. So, much like most people, Leslie Headland, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, they're all completely unqualified. The only qualification they have or need is the boxes that they check and the politics that they bring. So, like his fellow cave and snow trolls, the hill troll is not to be messed with. In fact, McKay refers to Damrod as the eater of dragon bones, a diet that few in Middle Earth could stomach. He'll be voiced by Benjamin Walker and joins the throng of the nefarious Adda, the father of orcs. Oh my God. This is a ridiculous thing that they invented in the father of orcs that they invented in the first season, which was just awful. I'm gonna have to rewatch the first season for the second season starts just so I can accurately cover it. I swore I'd never watch it again, but I'm gonna have to. Bolstering the ranks of darkness that Sauron is fostering amid his rise. Yes, we all remember Sauron's epic story in the first season where we found him floating on a raft in the middle of the ocean. In the middle of one of the first, the second episode or something like that, or maybe even the first, and everybody was like, "Oh, look, it's Sauron," and they're like, "No, it's not Sauron," and at the end they're like, "Oh, it's Sauron," and we were all like, "Yeah, we know." Inspiration for Damrod came from an unlikely place. He was inspired in part by Mike Ehrmantraut in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, saying, McKay, if you look at the way he moves, his casual sense of strength, it sounds like this troll will be even grumpier than the usual kind. This is just despicable writing and just like we're celebrating this. Look, Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, like probably the two greatest shows ever written. Like they're up there with The Sopranos. It's just the very height of TV. Vince Gilligan is a absolute genius in what he is and what he brings to the table. He created something that will live forever. It is just excellent television, and it only got better as time went on. Like Breaking Bad season 5, like, oh my god. And Better Call Saul too. Better Call Saul I think is actually better than Breaking Bad, but it's only good if you watch Breaking Bad. That way you can get all the things that happen. But so then it says, get ready then for casual carnage courtesy of Damrod and Rings of Power. This is all just fluff by Empire, because they ran this cover story for the Rings of Power with, Sauron and his stupid wig and Galadriel with his sneer, her trademark sneer, would not be confused with the trademark Galadriel smirk, because that's the other, the old girl boss smirk. At the end of the day, when somebody is like, oh, my character is based on this from this better thing, that immediately makes me think your show's probably not very good if you're not letting it stand on its own two legs. Now, take a look at this. This is the Rotten Tomatoes score for the Rings of Power Season 1. 38% audience score, which at the time we thought was very bad. We didn't see truly the depths that a show could sink to, like with The Acolyte. But, give them time. I have a feeling with Season 2, we might be able to get this down to 14, 13, 12%. But how much people are probably going to hate this. I mean, this show was just absolutely vile. It was beyond hated. And now here's the best part. Only 37% of viewers finished Amazon's The Rings of Power, which is very bad. And this is coming from Forbes. Paul Tassi, senior contributor, who writes news and opinion about video games, television, movies, and the internet. And he says, THI was out with a big new report about Amazon Prime's original productions, which Amazon has been throwing money at for years now, yet they arguably have to produce the sort of brand-defining programming that other streaming services have, despite a few hits here and there. From The Boys to Jack Reacher. I would put The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on there as well. I actually really liked that show. That was a good show. It was funny. Chunk of the piece centers around the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power series, developed mainly because Jeff Bezos wants his own Game of Thrones for the service, which is funny because HBO, the company that actually owns the rights to Lord of the Rings, responded to this with their own other Game of Thrones with House of the Dragon, which curb stomped Rings of Power last year and is currently destroying The Acolyte. But despite $1 billion spend, the report says just 37% of viewers finished the entire series, and that is bad. Amazon is trying to say otherwise. Amazon studio chief Jennifer Salke, who is a J.J. Abrams disciple, which is all you need to know about her, she pushed back on the idea and says, this desire to paint the show as anything less than a success, it's not reflective of any conversation I'm having internally. She then goes on to pump up the second season. That's a huge opportunity for us. The first season required a lot of setting up. Oh, my God. Generally speaking, the story required a lot of setting up. It's not a great excuse as to why something is lackluster, as setup was also most of Game of Thrones Season 1, leading to its explosive finale, but it was an excellent series of television all the same. That's a fantastic point here by Forbes. This was all set up, and it was all bad setup. It all set up to nothing that anybody wanted to see, and it didn't pay off in any kind of like logical way. The Celebrimbor, the greatest smith of the Second Age, he doesn't know what an alloy is. Sauron has to explain what an alloy is to this guy. And it was just like, oh, by the way, here's a blind lady who rules Numenor just because she's a blind lady who's also black. It's insane just how much this show was just leaning on identity politics. As for the 37% number, that's bad. There's no spinning that. Rival Netflix usually cancels most shows that come in under 50% completion. Squid Game is a mega hit, had 83% completion. And sure, Netflix is in a somewhat different position, given that you can binge all their shows at once, so completion is easier. But you could turn to HBO instead if you want with its weekly airings. The first season of Game of Thrones had more viewers by the end than it did in its premiere. Yes, that's what you want to see. You want to see growth. You don't want to see attenuation over time, which is what you see with things like this, things with like The Acolyte. House of the Dragon went down a little by the end, but you can blame that on a larger than usual initial surge because of its Game of Thrones connection, which I get. Meanwhile, just last month, The Last of Us more than doubled its initial live viewership by the end of the season. Well, buckle up for season 2, guys. So 37% completion rate is bad, very bad. It signifies fading interest in the show as time went on, which is unfortunate because the Forbes says it did get somewhat better in the later episodes, but it really didn't. In my opinion, it only got worse. And then also in Forbes, Eric Kane, a senior contributor, also wrote The Rings of Power was a massive flop that most viewers gave up on. So they're once again citing the 37% number. Just under 2/3 of all Rings of Power viewers quit watching the show before the finale, missing out on some truly ghastly television in the process. The big question I have is, out of all the viewers who did stick around for the all 8 episodes, how many were hate watching? I would say a lot of people. Most of them are content creators just kind of waiting to rip on it. He says, I finished the show because I was reviewing it because I have a macabre curiosity normally reserved for rubbernecking car wrecks on the side of the freeway, which is exactly what this series felt like. I like this guy. The other big question we must ask ourselves in the aftermath of this tragedy, why was The Rings of Power so unbelievably bad? Vast majority of people who started watching the show quit despite all the money and production values. Some attrition is to be expected, of course. Casual viewers who may not be that interested in fantasy or Tolkien might be drawn in for an episode or two, but a good show, even in fantasy, will see increasing viewership over time. More people tuned in for Game of Thrones. Yep, so they're citing Game of Thrones again. One theory I've heard is The Rings of Power was actually written by AI, which would explain why the story was so bizarre and the writing and dialogue seemed so fake. Is that the right word for it? You know what? That would actually really make sense if AI wrote The Rings of Power, because, man, was it just not good. It was not good. But it's coming back. Are you guys excited to see it? Probably not. Does the comparison to Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad make you more or less likely to watch it? I don't know. Sound off in the comments. Let me know. It's always a red flag to me when supposed creatives can't just let their work speak for themselves. They have to compare it to other more successful properties. But comparing Lord of the Rings to Breaking Bad is something I never expected to hear. Vince Gilligan is probably the most talented television writer of this generation, and his work is generational. That's why hacks like the Rings of Power crew and even the acolytes Leslie Headland felt the need to prop him up as inspiration. But if the first season of Rings of Power is any indicator of quality, it's very possible that the only similarity between these two IPs is that they both featured carbon-based life forms. Hey, make sure you subscribe to Tooneytown Wrestling and That Game Place for more Marvin the Movie Monster content, and tune in Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. for Toonie Talk TV, our live stream podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell icon to get notified of new videos as they drop. For all of us here at Tooneytown TV, I'm Marvin the Movie Monster. Now get out of here!